Hi, it's Kim from the Shamrock Quilt Studio, and today we're talking about our block of the month for the month of August. You know, it sure is hot out there. Summer is in full blast, and we've got at least one more month of these temperatures. We're making this block for August something that helps us stay cool, and that's a big old slice of watermelon. What a great way to spend a summer day sitting at the park eating a slice of watermelon. So join us and we'll put this together really quickly. And welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Well, hi there. I'm so glad you could join me today. And I've got a really cute block for today. And I think it's going to be something that's fairly easy for just about anyone to put together. Now, as with all the other blocks, we are starting with a 15-inch square of the material of your choice. I am still using the white as the background for all of these blocks. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a slice of watermelon and the remaining half of the watermelon. So let's talk a little bit about how I did that. So far, there's been no sewing. I've cut out a triangle for this piece in this fabric that I have, and initially I was just going to use a red fabric and embroidery the seeds on it, and you certainly could do that. But I found this super cute fabric that has the watermelon seeds already on it. And that just made things so much easier, so much quicker to put together. So I cut the triangle out for there, and I'm going to put a little PDF, as I usually do, of the shapes. And I cut a elongated semicircle for the other piece, and this piece of paper is cut off, but if you just fold that in half and put it on a fold, you would have your complete pattern. Now, what I did after this is I folded over the top to create a finished edge and pressed that down, and then I used a little bit of my applique glue to hold it in place. Now we need the watermelon rind. And usually if you think of watermelons, there's this kind of pale fiber that's between the actual red part that we usually eat and the actual rind of the watermelon. So I chose two different fabrics. I chose kind of a light green for that fleshy part and then a dark green for the rind. And the excuse me, the dark green that I chose has kind of a floral leafy look to it, and I thought that was appropriate for it. I think I would have preferred that the fleshy part, the green here, was a little bit paler, but this is what I had, and I think it conveys the appearance of a watermelon enough that we all know exactly what it is. So let's get started. What I did was I created, first of all, a bias strip out of the darkest fabric, and I used the 12 millimeter, or it's about a ½ inch bias tape maker, and I just made a tape long enough to go around it. And I'm making this all out of scrap, so the only thing I purchased was the red fabric, and I purchased probably about that much. So that's what, probably 1/8 of a yard. It was very little. So you could do this. If you had a full fat quarter, you would certainly be able to get enough fabric for both of these pieces. And you could always adjust it down or up a little bit depending on what your needs were. So I created that bias strip with folded edges on both sides. And then I created a strip for the centerpiece, and let me tell you how wide that is. I cut this at 1 inch wide, and I turned over one side of it with a 1/4 inch. So this inside seam here has the folded edge here, but it's a raw flat edge at the other side. And then the dark green has folded on both sides. We're going to start by putting that lighter green on first. And what I did was I started in the middle and used my applique glue to put a few dots down. And I pressed it in place and used the fold over from the green fabric as my guide as to how far down to place it, so that the raw edges of both the red fabric and the green fabric are right there together. That kind of gives you a consistent line across. And I went from the center out to the end and then folded over the end of that inner green piece. And I've got that folded and glued all the way around except for this end that we need to fold over. And I'm just going to trim it about probably 1/2 inch from the folded edge, and I'm going to do it at just a slight angle like that. And the reason for that is when I fold it over, I don't want a tail sticking out. Okay, and then let's get our glue out. And we'll also probably need a little clip to hold this to let it dry. So we'll get 2 out. All right, and then we're just going to put a couple of dots of our glue here and then here, just so it can hold it in place. So we've got just far enough for this to glue down. And then we're going to fold it. And let me grab I have a little awl that I use that's very helpful. If you have a stiletto, you could use that as well. Okay, so we're folding this down and we're just going to keep our line here straight. And it looks like I got my glue a little far out. So we'll just kind of shove that in there a bit. Okay, no worries if it folds over a little bit here. But I am going to put just another drop right there. And then we're going to press it down. And if we flip it over, I keep trying to stand that up. I don't think that's going to stand up. Okay, there's what we have. It's folded over. You've got just a little bit of tail, but we're going to cover that up with this. Now we're going to give it just a little bit of a minute to dry. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this one. We're going to do this exactly the same way. This one, I will tell you though, that these sides, I'm stitched down by machine. I thought it was just easier and faster to do that. And then I was able to handle this a little bit more. So just the red parts are stitched down. And at the very end, instead of trying to pull off a really sharp point, I just folded over the end and made it just a little blunt in there because, you know, usually by the time you handle the watermelon, it's not an exact point. So I think we're good there. Okay, and then the edges I did the same way I'm showing you here. All right, I think we are good enough to move forward with this. Now for this outer green rind, we are using that 1/2 inch bias with a fold on both sides. And nice sharp pressing is really helpful with this. And I would use a little bit of spray starch or a little bit of steam, whichever way you want to go, so that you get a nice sharp fold. But be careful not to stretch it because you're going to need the stretch when you put it here. You're going to want to make sure that that strip that on one side of it, you're going to make it kind of small, and the other end, you're really going to need to stretch that out to accomplish that curve. And you can see I think, let's put this on here. You can see that the way it sits right now, that outer edge, that rind, does want to stand up just a little bit. And that's because we are asking that fabric on the bias to perform at its max. So we're really asking it, when we push it down, to stretch way out while the inside keeps pulling together. And if you find it helpful to use your light box to be able to see what you're doing with these seams, that's great. I did find it a little bit helpful, but absolutely not necessary. Now for this rind area, we're going to do pretty much the same thing. I left a little bit more of it to do. We're just going to put the dots of glue right on the edge of this raw edge here. And then we're going to place this down, and I'm going to flip it over. Keep our glue off of our board. But what I'm doing is I'm lining up the edge of that light green fabric with the edge of the rind bias strip, this raw edge. So now if we flip it back over, you can see that we have this here. Let's give it a clip or two. And we're going to give it just a minute to dry in place. And then we're going to come back and glue this the same way that we did the other one. Your 15-inch piece of fabric that you're using for the background, what I decided to do was to place this with the big watermelon here, and then to have a slice just kind of laying at the bottom. And I had this pin just a minute ago, but we'll come back to that. You want to make sure that you leave at least that 1/2 inch around the edges of it so that you can sew it together either into your quilt or into your pillow cover. This would make a really sweet color, sweet pillow cover. And it might even be cute if you used a gingham fabric instead of the white. I looked and looked for gingham fabric that I could use like a tablecloth. I couldn't really find anything I thought was appropriate, but you might have access to something like that. Okay, we've got that glued down. We're going to come back and do the very end. Come on, glue. And remember, with this applique glue, you don't need a lot. It is surprisingly efficient at what it does. And you're going to do the same thing. You're going to cut it. I'm going to do this just a little bit less than 1/2 inch and at that angle. I'm going to stick a little bit of glue underneath the fold. You don't want too much, because when you go to sew it, you don't want to have to glue. You don't want to have to sew through a bunch of glue. Okay, here we go. And we're going to clip that as well so it can dry. Now what we're going to do is we're going to place this piece. Let me move some of this stuff so it's not quite such a stretch to get to. I've marked my block with my 1/2 inch so I know exactly how far I can go. And I'm going to just position this piece. I've kind of got it marked where I want it. And I'm going to double check that I'm about 1.5 inches on that side. And not quite as much this way, so we're going to come this way just a little bit. Now we're about 1 inch over here and about 1 inch there. I think we're close enough. And I put a little line that I measured exactly the same distance down so we could make sure that we got it so that it was level. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a nice pin in the middle. And then I'm going to put a couple of pins on each side. That's just to hold it in place. If you just put one pin, it's going to twist on you and you'll lose that level. Let me turn it around. We're going to check our lines there. Okay, this is still drying. The rest of this is ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a couple of drops of glue here at the bottom, in the middle, about halfway between, and then I'm going to do at the end. And I'm noticing that because we're asking that fabric to really stretch out and perform, it wants to pop up on us. So we're going to add some pins to hold it in place. You're just gently encouraging it. And in the meantime, I'm going to add some glue on this side. And a couple of pins. Whoops, I missed the background fabric entirely. I think that pin is, it's bent. We have some glue there. And remember, this is just to hold it in place long enough to get it glued down. Okay, there we are all the way to the end. And then we're going to put a couple of drops at the top. I don't think you'll have much of a problem with the top because it's just a straight fold. I think what we'll do is we'll put the one pin right in the middle, and we'll leave it at that. Okay, so we've got the big one on. Now, it's your choice. How do you want to style this? Do you want to have it coming up like it's a piece standing? Do you want to put it on its side? How did you want that to go on? And that's going to be truly all up to you. I think I'm going to do mine. I kind of like that. Do I want to do that? That one doesn't look quite right. What about that? I think I'm just going to go with this. And for this one, you could either glue it down or you can pin it down, whatever your choice is. I think we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of glue on it. For me, I find that it's much easier to sew when it's glued, and I can take those pins out. The thread, to me, gets tangled around all those pins. And that's something that I learned when we were doing Miss Kelly, is the use of glue and the elimination of pins really sped up my hand stitching. Okay, so we've got everything in place now. You could either choose to stitch this on the machine, which would be super fast, or you can choose to do it by hand. I'm going to do it by hand. And if you wanted to put some other things on here, like I said, if you wanted to do a little gingham tablecloth, you could do that. Some folks like salt with their watermelon. You could put a salt shaker if you'd like. There's just so many options of what you could do. If you got real creative, you could put a big bite mark out of one of these pieces of watermelon. But we're trying to keep our block of the month for our novelty quilt very simple. And I'll be honest with you, some of them I think are too simple, but it's more of a framework of where to start so we can talk about techniques and how some things are done. You know, any any craft you take on, any trade you take on, when you first start, your work is at one level, and as you practice it and you move and you do more and more, it becomes more complicated. Your skills are enhanced, your confidence is enhanced, and you can do more elaborate projects and more sophisticated projects. But this one I chose specifically so it could be very simple, very basic, and something that anybody can accomplish. And I think we're moving on with that pretty well. So here's, oops, we don't want to lose that. Here's our finished block. Watermelon for the month of August. You know, it's almost here. It'll be here just in a couple of days, so I hope that you'll get your watermelons so you can enjoy this. It's kind of like the last hooray of the summer, and this has been a definite hot summer for me. I don't know about where you are, but I have enjoyed it. This particular one, this block, I have found it to be one of the more enjoyable ones. Like I said, it was simple. It came together really quickly and easily, and then now all that's left to do is just for me to applique stitch this in place, which will be fairly easy. Now, I did want to mention to you that when we folded this one under, it's this in right here, you can see that there's a little tail right here sticking out. So when we go to stitch that, what we will do is we will shove that tail underneath and then stitch here to hold it in place, and that will make that corner just perfect. And right now we should be all glued up. We probably can take all these pins out now. I think I'll leave those in, but you can see we're already significantly in place and dry so that we can move forward. That's one good thing about this applique glue. If you use it sparingly, it does dry very quickly, and if you have a need for it to dry even faster, use your little mini iron that's dry to just tap it lightly, and the heat will speed along that drying for you. And if you make a mistake, it's water soluble, so you could always apply a damp rag or mist it with a little bit of water and be able to pull it up and reposition if you like. You're just going to need to let that fabric dry before you glue it again. I hope you've enjoyed this video. We'll be back for next month for September. If you've enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and catch us next week at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Thanks for coming and have a great day.